Hello and welcome to session 2 of our conversation about wise well-being practices. I'm Matt Bloom, happy to join you again. I hope you had some time to reflect on your recent good days and difficult days. A first wise well-being practice that will serve us all well over time. And we're going to come back in session 3 and revisit this practice and talk a bit more about how it can be so helpful to us. In this session, we're going to talk about the final 2 dimensions of well-being, authenticity and thriving, remembering that the comprehensive model includes all 4, daily well-being, resilience, authenticity, thriving, and that they build on each other. And so it's important to attend to all 4 dimensions. Authenticity has, as the other dimensions did, a couple of important components. One we call self-integrity. You could think of this as a combination of our sense of self-worth, our self-confidence, our self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is our belief that we have important talents and gifts. So it's more than just self-worth. It's more the comprehensive way we think about ourselves. Another way of describing self-integrity is, do we have a clear and positive identity or self-concept? We know who we are, we know our strengths and weaknesses, we can embrace our strengths, give ourselves credit for having gifts, and we acknowledge our weaknesses and address them. So part of authenticity is our self-view, self-integrity. Another part is our dignity, the way we find that others respond to the person we are. Do we feel that they respect us for who we are? Do we feel like they acknowledge our strengths? Do we feel like they treat us with the kind of human respect that everybody should experience? But also, do they recognize our position? You as a pastor or ministry worker have certain responsibilities and authority. You experience dignity when other people acknowledge your responsibilities and authority. And you experience a lack of dignity if in some way somebody is denying your authority. Even worse, if you find that some way your personhood, who you are as a person, is being denied or impugned. We find that women and pastors of color who serve in predominantly white denominations are more likely to experience a lack of dignity. In some way, people are not recognizing their innate worth. In some way, they are feeling impugned for something that is quite fundamental to who they are, their race, their ethnicity, their gender. One of the things that we are very interested in is this notion of a quiet self. A quiet self is when we just don't think about ourselves very often. It's something that we might normally call humility, but research shows that a quiet self is different than some conceptions of humility. People with quiet self think of others. They're not preoccupied with themselves. In fact, they give themselves very little thought. They think about their well-being when they need to. They think about themselves in positive ways, but they just don't spend much time thinking about themselves. And what is really important for attaining a quiet self is both self-integrity and dignity. So notions of the self disappearing, self-abnegation, research suggests are not going to lead to a quiet self. Research shows that people that are trying to forget themselves end up spending a lot of time thinking about themselves. What's important from our perspective is thinking well of yourself in a balanced way. I have my strengths and I need to not acknowledge my weaknesses. I have the better angels of my nature. I have my dark side. That sense of acknowledging who you are as a person can lead you to actually not thinking about yourself as much. But you also, of course, need to experience dignity. And so we find that fit with ministry context is really important for authenticity, to be in places that fit with your skills and abilities and to be in places where you are respected for a person and for your role as clergy or ministry worker are fundamentally important for your authenticity. And we're encouraging denominations to take this into account. It's very important for clergy well-being to find the right match. So having an authentic pastoral identity, which is something that we hear a lot, means having self-integrity and dignity. It means acknowledging your strengths and weaknesses, and it means feeling respected for the person that you are. One of the wise well-being practices that research points to as a way to help us at least experience self-integrity is to regularly revisit our life narrative. Telling our life story or writing it down is a wise well-being practice. And by doing so, we can help increase our sense of self-integrity. We can learn more about our strengths and enrich our ability to embrace them. We can learn more about our weaknesses and take steps to address them. So practices like a daily diary or regular life journaling, or even just telling yourself stories out loud are wise well-being practices, and one of the ways they help is by building authenticity. We can also turn to exemplars, people who we admire. What's important for an exemplar is that we feel that in some way we are similar to that person, and therefore we can learn from them. We can see strengths they have that we think we share. And by learning about how they use those strengths and how they embrace them, we can learn about our own use of those strengths and we can embrace them better. We can learn from the stories of exemplars about how they've dealt with challenges or difficulties or their own weaknesses. And so we turn to them, and we prefer the term exemplar to mentor, because exemplars, we need to just see something in them that resembles something in us. And once we see that connection, we can use and learn from that person's life. It's wonderful if we can interact with them, but we can even learn from exemplars that have passed on through their writings, through stories people tell about them, through biographies or autobiographies. So turning to exemplars is a powerful way to boost authenticity. And if we can have a wise guide, again, we prefer this over a mentor. A wise guide is somebody who is an exemplar. We see parts of ourselves in them. There's similarity in who they are as a person, the strengths they have, their life experiences. But they can be a wise guide when they'll journey with us, when they can spend time with us. And so looking for wise guides is really important. Finding that person who will spend time with you. We find that many of the best wise guides don't think they're a wise guide, but of course they are. Somebody who's further along the journey of life, further along the journey of ministry, who has a quiet ego, but will share their life and their stories with us. We can learn from them, and they can learn from us, and we can journey together. So authenticity, feeling good about yourself by acknowledging the fullness of who you are as a person, and feeling respected in that fullness by the other people that you interact with regularly. Thriving, the last dimension, has three important components, and I'll try to stitch them together so you see how they're connected. First is our sense of meaning in life, that we understand what matters in life, what's important, what gives life value. A second is a sense of purpose. Purpose means that we somehow contribute to what is meaningful. We participate in meaningfulness. Purpose is our own unique way to be involved in the things that make life important, that make life matter, that make life wonderful. And lastly, having strong connections with people that have a similar sense of meaning. The best social connections are with individuals who share our values, our beliefs, who embrace the same things that we embrace as making life most important. And we share a richer experience of love and mutuality and community with those people, because the core of our life, our values and beliefs, our sense of virtue, our sense of what really matters, is something that creates deeply meaningful and deep connections with others. So connection is really the key word here when thriving. It's a connection to truth and goodness by understanding what makes life matter, what brings meaning. It's a connection to impactful action through purpose. We know how we can make a difference in our work, in our family, in our friendships, in our other commitments in life. And connection to community, to a sense of belonging with others. So for clergy and ministry workers, one of the most important experiences of connection they have is with their local church, with the ministry people that they serve. And so when they have positive connections with at least some members of that community, they're much more likely to thrive. when they share conceptions of what ministry is about, this is sharing connection to truth and goodness, when they have a common understanding of what matters in ministry, they can form even better connections with that local church or ministry community because they agree on where their efforts, where their prayer life, where their resources should be devoted. Again, this is why being in the right ministry context is so vitally important, not only for effective ministry, but for clergy well-being. It fundamentally shapes authenticity and thriving. So connecting to truth and goodness, connecting to impactful action, fundamental to your well-being as a clergy or ministry worker, and connection to a community of belonging. So all four of these together are experiences of flourishing. Flourishing is when you can achieve high levels of daily well-being, resilience, authenticity, and thriving. And what I invite you to do in preparation for the next session is to reflect on a moment in ministry in which you felt most authentic, when you felt you were at your best, when you felt like you were doing just what God told you to do. And write a story about that, first-person story. Write about your experience on that day or during that event in which ministry life was at its fullness for you and you felt you were at your best. I encourage you to take some time to write that life story, and then join me again for session 3, where we start to address wise well-being practices specifically.